as Ukraine pushes the war into Russia.
Киевский режим предпринял очередную масштабную провокацию.
Where are Moscow's allies? Have Putin's friends ditched him amid Zelensky's Kursk dare? At least this is the impression those observing the war closely seem to be getting. The stony silence from Russia's traditional partners, particularly those in Central Asia and Transcaucasus, on the biggest incursion into Russia by a foreign power since World War II, hasn't gone unnoticed. Not that they were very vocal in their support for Russia or overtly critical of it when Moscow invaded Ukraine over its ambitions to join the United States-led military alliance North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO. Some had even accused them of following an ostrich policy. Since August 6th, Ukrainian forces have reportedly occupied dozens of villages and hamlets on more than 1,000 square kilometres and captured Russian servicemen. Except for Belarus, the Central Asian allies of Russia including Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have neither uttered a word on the invasion of the Russian region of Kursk, at least in public, nor have they offered any military aid to Russia. These nations are bound to respond to such an act by a foreign power on a member state's territory by virtue of being a part of the Collective Security Treaty, or CST, a military accord they signed with Russia and Minsk. Following the Kursk offensive, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko on August 15th told Russia television network, "Let's sit down and end this fight. Neither Ukrainian people, nor Russians or Belarusians need it." He further claimed that only the US, which has provided the most military aid to Ukraine, benefits from the war. The staunch Russian ally Lukashenko on August 10th ordered a deployment of troops to the Belarusian border with Ukraine, saying Kyiv's drones had violated its airspace in the course of its military incursion into Russia's Kursk.
На высоте 1,5 километра и дальности 6,5 километров силами противовоздушной обороны было уничтожено несколько целей над территорией Беларуси. Ночью и сегодня с утра происходит поиск того, что было уничтожено. Мы подозреваем, что это ударные беспилотники, точно летевшие, нарушив воздушное пространство Беларуси, летели из Украины.
Belarusian state-controlled television showed tanks and missiles loaded onto trains. Belarus's foreign ministry summoned Ukraine's charge d'affaires demanding measures to ensure such incidents would not recur and suggested a repeat would prompt Belarus to consider whether Kyiv's diplomatic presence in Minsk was appropriate. Ukraine, in turn, called Belarus's move an attempt to help Putin and divert the attention of Ukraine's command to this sector. In an interview with Kyiv Post, Alexander Azarov, head of an organization of former Belarusian security forces who left the country after 2020, said Belarus is a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, and according to the new CSTO doctrine, when one member is attacked, others should help, as far as possible. Meanwhile, the Belarusian opposition media reported that Russia had requested military equipment from Belarus, and the Lukashenko regime began transferring equipment to the Russian Federation, not from warehouses but from active army units. A batch of Belarusian armoured vehicles has already been sent to Russia, as per the reports. According to experts, Lukashenko may have resorted to sending weapons to Russia while, what Ukrainian critics call, imitating a threat from Ukraine to ward off the need to send his troops to help the Russians in the Kursk region, because that would mean direct participation in the war. According to Nikolai Mitrokhin, a researcher with Germany's Bremen University, cited in an Al Jazeera report, no CST member state would send their troops to Kursk to fight for Russia. Since day one of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the nations of Central Asia and Transcaucasus, including Armenia, that suspended its CST membership, forbade their nationals to fight for either side, and pledged to stick to Western sanctions slapped on Moscow. But the sanctions malfunctioned because thousands of companies in ex-Soviet republics profit from re-exporting dual-purpose goods, such as microchips and semiconductors, to Russia. Moscow, observers say, wouldn't mind if the forces of CST member states could contribute to solving its problems. However, a CST member state has to ask for military aid from other pact members. Russian President Vladimir Putin might hesitate to do that because it would be seen as his admission of political and military weakness. Commenting on what he sees as Putin's dilemma, Dosim Satpayev, an analyst based in Kazakhstan's financial center Almaty, told Al Jazeera, if Ukraine's successful military operation in Kursk was a slap to Putin, then the invitation of CST forces would be a second slap. The CST, when formed, was actively advertised as a structure where Russia is the main security umbrella for all member states. This is why observers feel that Putin has been trying to downplay the gravity of the Kursk invasion by dubbing the push against Ukraine's cross-border assault as a counter-terrorism operation instead of an act of war. Meanwhile, other Russian allies, including North Korea and Iran, haven't commented on the Kursk invasion either. China, which has stood by Moscow amid the war, commented on the issue on August 12, saying, all parties should abide by the three principles for de-escalating the situation: no expansion of the battlefield, no escalation of fighting, and no fueling the flame. Beijing would maintain communication with the international community to play a constructive role in the political settlement of the crisis. Western media reports and US intelligence have often accused Pyongyang and Tehran of supplying weapons to Russia amid the war. However, there are no reports on whether Moscow is receiving any help on that front from the two allies with regard to the situation in Kursk. Recently, The Telegraph reported that while Russian forces are launching counterattacks on the Kursk front line, Zelensky has once again appealed to Western allies to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles for strikes deep into Russian territory. A report by Kyiv Independent, citing a source close to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's administration, says that talks between Kyiv and the US about supplies of long-range cruise missiles are in the advanced stages as Washington closely monitors the developments in Kursk.
I've spoken with my staff on a regular basis, probably every 4 or 5 hours for the last 6 or 8 days. And it's creating a real dilemma for Putin, and we've been in direct contact, constant contact with the Ukrainians. That's all I'm going to say about it while it's active. Okay?
Earlier on August 15th, Politico reported, citing undisclosed sources, that Biden's administration is open to supplying Kyiv with long-range cruise missiles to bolster the recently provided F-16 fighter jets, among other purposes. According to Politico, the US is considering providing Ukraine with JSSM missiles, which can be launched over 200 miles from fourth-generation F-16s. An influential aide to Putin said on August 16th that the West and the US-led NATO had helped to plan Ukraine's surprise attack on Kursk, an allegation made by Putin previously but denied by Washington.
Судя по всему, противник при помощи своих западных хозяев, он выполняет их волю, и руками украинцев Запад с нами воюет. Так вот, судя по всему, противник стремится к улучшению своих переговорных позиций в будущем. Но и здесь ответ со стороны граждан России уже есть. Это единодушная поддержка всех, кто попал в беду, поддержка армии и увеличение, что очень важно, увеличение количества желающих присоединиться к нашим мужчинам, к бойцам, которые героически с оружием в руках защищают Россию.
Meanwhile, a report by The Times suggests that British officials are working to persuade allies to allow Ukraine to use the UK's long-range Storm Shadow cruise missiles against and inside Russia. Ukraine has air and ground-launched missiles provided by the US, UK, and France that can reach almost 200 miles from the launch point, but certain restrictions on the use of missiles against Russian territory remain in place. What remains to be seen is if Ukraine's move of pushing the war into what it called the aggressor's territory will motivate its allies to lift the few remaining restrictions on weapons use against Russia, which seems isolated amid an attack on its territory.